Pirkei Eliezer, Parak Zayin. We're holding in the middle of the parak. We're still continuing about the story of the Moilad of the moon, when the moon comes each month and how it disappears and reappears, etc. Says the Medrash, Ein halavana chaser min hashamayim ela keheref ayin. The moon is only lacking; it only disappears from the heavens. It only disappears for the amount of time of keheref ayin, the blink of an eye. It's only a split moment that the moon actually completely disappears. Meaning at the end of the month, between the end of one month, the beginning of the next month, when the moon is completely not visible, it's technically only for a haraf ayin, for a blink of an eye. And afilu yesh ba kimoli achut seveves b'mizrach u'v'mayrav. Even if the moon is as small, as thin as a chut, as a small string, the moon still continues to go around the east and the west, right? It rises in the west and it sets in the east. That's where the moon goes. So it still continues to do those motions, even though it's very, very small and you can't even see it in the beginning of the month. After so we spoke about last week, there's something called the Moilad. The Moilad is the technical astronomical calculation or astronomical time when the sun, the moon, and the earth line up in a way that the sun is shining at part of the moon that's facing the earth, and that you could see the moon because of that, right? And when you can't see the moon, right, because the moon the moon hasn't turned to have it, the part that the sun is shining on, be facing the earth. Before that happens, you can't see the moon. In the beginning of the month, you can't see the moon. Right, so the Moilad is the time that it officially lines up, and the Maisa, in practice, you can't actually see the moon right away, because it's so small that it's not visible. It takes some time in order to be able to see the moon after the astronomical Moilad. Says the Medrash, there's no power in the eye, meaning the eye cannot see. The naked eye can't see the moon until 8 big hours. Whether we're talking about the beginning of the month or the end of the month, the point is that it takes 8 hours from the Moilad until you can see the moon. So this is a little bit of a difficult line over here. As the Mefarshim speak out, there's a whole complicated sugya about this in the Gemara and Rosh Hashanah and Daf Chaf Amud Beis. The Gemara says like this. The Gemara says that the moon is always Chaf Daled Shah Michsi Sihara. The moon is covered for 24 hours. The moon always disappears for 24 hours. Now, part of that 24-hour period is going to be before the Moilad, meaning the old moon is so small that you can't see it anymore. And then comes the Moilad, when the new moon is officially supposed to start. And then there's going to be a period in the new moon that you can't see the moon because it's still too small to see it. Right? So the Gemara says that Lidi Don Tam Nisri Me'atika V'Shis Mechadata. For us, meaning for the people in Bavel, so the moon, when it disappears for 24 hours, it's 18 hours before the Moilad, meaning 18 hours of the old moon you can't see it, and then 6 hours of the new moon, and then you could see it. And then goes on, in Eretz Yisrael, it's 6 hours of the old moon that you can't see it, and 13 hours of the new moon. What? Yeah, 6 plus 13 is 24.
6 plus 13 is 19, I think.
It's 19? You're right. 1 second. This is... So maybe it's a mistake over here. Maybe it's supposed to be 8 and 6. 18 and 6. Yeah. 18 and 6. It could be he's making a mistake. I'm not sure exactly. Because first he said 18 and 6, and then he says 13 and 6. It could be the 13 and 6 is a mistake. But the point is that there's a period before and after the Moilad that you can't see the moon. It disappears. Right? So our Medrash says that 8 hours after the Moilad, that's when you could first see the moon. But according to the Gemara, that's not true. According to the Gemara, in Bavel it's 18 hours, 6 hours, sorry, 6 hours after, and in Eretz Yisrael it's 13 hours after. So where do you get the number 8 from? So the Radal brings from the Gra and other sources that change the gears over here. And they say no,
Dairy.
instead of 8 hours. That looks good actually.
It's dairy though.
I don't care.
I mean, some people might have had meaty shalashudas.
I didn't have midi shalshers. 8 hours. Let's go. 8 hours. The Medrash says 8 hours. So the Gra says that we should change it to 6 hours. Right?
6 hours after.
6 hours after the Moilad, you can see the moon, and the Gemara would, and the Medrash would be talking about from the point of view of Bavel, that the Gemara is saying that the Gemara says Bavel after 6 hours you can see after 6 hours after the Moilad you can see the moon already. That's what the Radal says. The Marzu, which again in this parak also was written by the father of the Maril Diskin, so the Marzu over here says that no, really it's supposed to say 8 hours. When the Gemara says that if in Bavel it takes 6 hours for it to be the moon to be visible after the Moilad, the Gemara is talking about when it could technically or physically be visible. But most people are not going to see it after 6 hours. Most people won't see it that early. It takes more time for most people to be able to see it. So what's that amount of time? That's 8 hours. So our Medrash is like the Gemara that it's talking about the same Metzius, but the Gemara says 6 hours because it's talking about what's the first time it could be seen, it could possibly be seen, and our Medrash is talking about 8 hours because that's the time that most people would see it. Okay, here's another point. It says we said Shmoyna Shoyis Gedolim, 8 big hours. So what does it mean, big hours? So Radal explains that big hours means 24 hours, meaning clock hours, as opposed to Shoyis Manios, because Shoyis Manios are sometimes bigger and sometimes smaller, depending on the time of the year. So it says, we said, Itafka 8 big hours, meaning 8 hours that are always going to be big, meaning 20 hours on the clock.
60 minutes.
60 minutes.
Tonight.
Next week.
Next week, I'm sorry.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
I learned this sukkah that in the full moon,
Yeah,
which is in the 14th, 13th, 14th, 15th of the month,
yeah,
exactly in the middle,
yeah.
that night in the middle, it can be, the moon comes up at Shkia, approximately Shkia, and goes down at Nates. It's like a perfect, that's like,
Yeah.
perfect. And then throughout the month, the moon coming up and going down is like,
It varies.
with Seder, meaning there's a,
Yeah, there's a way
earlier
of
in the
measuring
month,
it.
where the molad is always seen as the moon is leaving the horizon. And at the end of the month, it's always, it comes up earlier and earlier and earlier, and as the month goes on, it's out later and later and later, something like that. So why can't it be at the molad that it's the opposite? It goes away at Shkia, mamish down at Shkia, and comes up again at Nates, but you can't see it during the day. So meaning you wouldn't be
So
able
I'll
to
tell you
see
the
it
truth.
because
The
it's
truth-
just not there.
The truth is that I don't know enough information about this topic to answer your question. That's first of all. And second of all, I don't know what you're asking. But
I'm asking, 8 hours seems kind of, I was about to get to that. 8 hours seems difficult because the position of the moon should be at the molad. You wouldn't be able to see it until like the next night, when it should be.
and sometimes it comes up in the morning. I don't know exactly how it works out.
Okay.
But like I said, there's an interesting point over here because we Gemara said a difference between Eretz Yisrael and Bavel. Then in Eretz Yisrael, it's 6 hours after the Moilad, you can see it, and then in Bavel 6 hours after the Moilad, and Eretz Yisrael it's whatever 18 or 13 hours after the Moilad. You can see the new moon, right? So the question is, what's the difference between Eretz Yisrael and Bavel? And the answer is the Baal Ma'or over there, Rabbi Zerachia Halevi. The Baal Ma'or has a whole lengthy discussion over there, where he says that the difference is because Bavel is more east and Eretz Yisrael is more west. And this is a very interesting thing. In that discussion, the Baal Ma'or writes that Eretz Yisrael is a fourth into what's called the east of the whole world. And based on that, you can actually calculate what the Baal Ma'or understood to be the international dateline. It's like this is like the earliest Marmuk about the international dateline. That Baal Or and the Kuzri. Other people argue with him exactly where or whatever, how to draw the line. But that's where the discussion comes up in the context of where, how many hours after the Moilad could you actually see the moon? That's a whole controversial thing. Where exactly is the international dateline? Could it go through a landmass, or does it cut around land masses and it only goes through the sea, etc.?
But it was near Eretz Yisrael, according to Malamor, as opposed to in the Pacific Ocean now.
No, not near Eretz Yisrael. Fourth. If you take a globe and you let's say you cut it into pieces, right? So Eretz Yisrael is going to be a fourth to the east.
Towards the east or from the east?
From the east.
So where does the east begin? Which country?
So I don't know exactly how the cheshbon works, but it's somewhere off of, let's say, China, a little bit east of China or something like that.
So that's where the east begins?
Somewhere that we call it the Far East, right?
Where does the east end? Then?
What?
Where does the east end?
Where does the east end? If that's where it begins,
Yeah.
it ends and begins in the same place. No.
No.
There's not like a half point.
Then where's the west?
What?
Because
I'm saying there's wherever the east begins, there's a line, right?
Yeah. So like you said,
It's an imaginary line.
Where does the west begin then?
It's the same line. One side of the line is east, one side of the line is
So
west.
China, then you have like right where Japan is, I guess.
What?
So right in where Japan and the Pacific Ocean, that's where the west starts.
So I don't know exactly all the different opinions of how it works. So I saw in the name of the Chaznish that you shouldn't go to the Philippines because different islands in the Philippines
East and west.
might be one considered Sunday, one place is Shabbos, even within the same set of islands.
So if you go take a flight from China to Los Angeles, you have a problem then?
If you take a flight from China to Los Angeles, so you're going backwards a day.
Means that if you're going on Thursday, you're going back to Wednesday then.
I've done that a lot. I did that a few times.
What?
I did it a few times from Korea to Los Angeles.
What were you doing in Korea?
Testing
North
the
Korea or
international
South?
dateline.
North Korea or South Korea?
If it was North Korea, I wouldn't be here today. The story is that when the Mir went to Shanghai, when they got to Shanghai, there were big questions. No, when they
No,
went
went
to
to the Kobe, Japan, right? There were questions, and apparently some people were machmer and they did Yom Kippur for 2 days.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they
But
said.
Shabbos was every week was an issue because the community held Shabbos was Shabbos,
Right.
and the Chazanish Paskin
That Sunday was
Sunday was
Shabbos.
Shabbos.
Right. There's also I think a shadow about Australia.
I'm trying to figure in my
I think like the consensus is that like Australia is a day is ahead, but no, I think the consensus of Australia is a day back, but that if you leave Australia, then you would technically be going a day ahead. So that if you in the land of Australia, you'd be Shabbos to Shabbos, and then if you would go into the water, so then you're leaving Shabbos and going into Sunday.
Because New Zealand is
No, or maybe it was the opposite. I think it was the opposite. The opposite problem.
You're talking about the continent of Australia or the country of Australia?
It's the same thing.
No, because New Zealand is in Australia also, but it's not Australia. The continent of Australia has two countries, Australia and New Zealand. So that's why I asked on purpose. If you
I don't know. It's a whole topic of the discussion, the international dateline. I wasn't prepared to speak about it, so I don't really know what I'm saying.
So Israel is like in the middle, then in between east and west.
No, that's the thing. Israel is a fourth. Is a fourth towards.
So where's the middle?
the side of
Then?
the
Where's
east.
the midpoint?
I don't know.
In the middle of the Atlantic Ocean? Or
Let's say the middle of the Atlantic. Probably, I don't know. You would have to make a cheshbon. If Israel is the fourth, so then where it is, it's probably in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean.
it's in the middle of the
I'd
ocean
assume.
at some point. you
Something
switch
like
over.
that. Yeah.
So
Probably
means
there
that
anyways.
all of the USA is
Yeah,
the west,
I mean,
then, yeah?
whatever. Yeah. What?
All of the USA is the west.
Yeah, but the Balamor didn't know about the USA unless he was a Navi.
No, but the point is that if you can calculate
Wasn't there
the
yet.
circle of the
He
world.
thought that the Earth was flat.
I don't know, but they hadn't discovered America
I
yet.
guess he imagined that if he takes a boat and he goes out too far, he's gonna fall off the Earth. Oh, I'm falling! Help! Too
I
late,
still
you're-
think that.
I hear.
That's why I go from Korea to Los Angeles. You don't go from here to New York.
Well, because you're afraid of falling off the end of the earth.
Right.
Well, no, in a plane it doesn't matter. You're not going to fall. You're flying.
Yeah, that's what Icarus thought.
Swear.
That's what Icarus thought. And then his
Wax.
wings.
I don't fly in a wax plane.
His wings fell off, right? Cheshbon Yemais Shnei Halavana, the calculation of the days of the solar year are Shlesh Me'ais Achamishim Va'arba Yomim Ushlish Yom. 354 days and a third of a day. We spoke about exactly how we came to this conclusion
Solar years?
last week. The days of I'm sorry, I said solar, I meant to say lunar. The days of a lunar year are 354 and a third days, meaning 354 days and 8 hours. We spoke about it last week. If you take 29 days and 12 hours, multiplied by 12, you're going to get to this number. Actually, if you also include the 40 minutes. 29 days,
40.
29 days, 12 hours and 40 minutes times 12 months is going to be 354 days and 8 hours. Like we spoke about last week. Kol hashois shel chedesh halavana.
Sorry for bothering you.
Well, you want to know where we are?
Does this go north to south also, or just east and west?
Kol hashois shel chedesh halavana. All the hours of a lunar month are shva me'ais u'shmeina shois u'shtei dais shah. 708 hours and 40 minutes. 708 hours and 40 minutes. That is a lunar month. That's how many hours are in a lunar month. Kol hashois shel shnas halavana. All the hours of a lunar year are shmeinas alafim v'chamesh me'ais v'arba shois. 8,504 hours. So a lunar year is 8,504 hours. So if you waste your time, so you've wasted 8,504 hours in a lunar year.
So if there's a month of 29 or 30, it's the same thing?
What?
A month of 29 and a month of 30 has the same amount of hours?
No. I'm saying we're talking about the astronomical month.
Oh, okay. What
We're
does
not
that
talking
mean?
about a calendar month. The astronomical month is always going to be 29 days, 12 hours, and 40 minutes.
But do we live by that or we don't?
No, because technically, what do you do with the half a day and 40 minutes? So what we do is we sometimes add a month and sometimes don't add a month,
I mean, sometimes I eat.
and sometimes we add a year.
Yamin.
Fine.
Yamin.
Well, no, we sometimes added.
Rosh Chodesh Kislev can be 2 days.
So, yeah,
or
that's what I
one
meant.
day.
That's I'm
Okay.
saying. How do we compensate for that? Every month is 29 days plus half a day plus 8 hours, right?
That's the reason why it was
So
considered.
how could you have a month that's 20? That's that number, right? So what you do is sometimes you add an extra day and sometimes you don't add an extra day, and that compensates for the extra half a day and 8 hours. Right? If every other month you add an extra day, so you pachas v'yoser compensated for a half a day. Let's say in the span of a year, you've added half a day on average.
You're right, it always switches on and off.
Right.
Yeah. So in Libya, I guess, then you have to move things around a bit. Yeah.
Okay, Ibrior is not. It doesn't have to do with
Varies.
in Ibrior. It doesn't have to do with a lunar year. That has to do with getting the lunar year to shtim with
No,
the
I'm talking
solar
about
year.
the 29 and 30. The back.
Yeah.
It doesn't alternate though.
It's always 30, right?
No, it doesn't alternate. Some year, doesn't matter whether it's a leap year, doesn't matter if there's an extra Adar or not. Sometimes sometimes it's
Some
both
are
short,
always 30.
sometimes it's both,
Sometimes it's always 30.
sometimes
It's
they're
always
both-
29.
and sometimes
sometimes-
it's 29 and then 30.
Yeah.
Ah.
Or either or,
So the
depending
It
on
can
the
be either
year.
or.
The two
Can't be
others
30
can
to
switch on and
29.
off.
Wait a minute, what? It could be either 29
It
or
can be either both 29,
Well, both
30.
others.
both 30,
or one of the one
or
is
and then
30.
29 and 30.
Yeah,
But not 30 and 29. he's
But
right.
not 30 to 29, and it's nothing to do whether it's a leap year or not.
right. Just every year
Because a leap
different.
year is on the 19-year cycle,
Right.
but I don't know what there's a cycle for the
For the others?
Kislev and Cheshvan. That I don't know if there's a cycle.
Well, Kislev has to always be, no?
No,
No.
this was a could
Kislev
be the 29 and 30.
Right. Sometimes
No,
2 days
no.
Rosh Chodesh, sometimes 3 days. Sometimes what? Sometimes 1 day, sometimes 2 days.
I think we need a line.
I need two l'chaims.
Yeah, that's
Anyways.
very interesting. But some months are always shloshim.
Yeah.
Some months are always
Like-
double.
like
Like
Nisan.
Nisan's always 30 days.
Any month I heard with the Yom Tov, it's shloshim.
That's
Right,
Pshat?
yes.
Sivan.
Chodesh Iyar is always 29.
Tishrei, Nisan.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Year is always 29.
Anything with
right?
like
Year's
a
always
chag.
29.
And
something
Sivan
like-
is always 30, right?
Not
Right.
dafka the
Tammuz
three.
is always
but like-
29.
Hanukkah is not kol
Yes.
echad.
Av is always 30.
Yes.
Elul is
It's
always
Drabanan.
30.
Right.
It's
Right.
Drabanan.
Right.
It's Drabanan.
Right.
There's also not
Right.
always shloshim. I think it's
Actually,
29.
Because that's also Drabanan.
Purim is
Kislev,
not-
Kevari
yeah.
also.
29, 30.
But all the
Interesting.
time
Davis.
Davis?
shloshim. So this
That doesn't matter, but
calculation
I
doesn't
don't
work
remember
out
what it is.
because
And
it does
Shabbat.
work out because 29.
I
no,
don't
doesn't work
remember,
out.
but it's always the same.
Listen to this. The Radal says an interesting thing. How many days are in a solar year? I'm sorry, lunar year? 354 and a little bit more, right? 354 and a third.
As opposed to
That's what?
365
That's
on
three.
the sun.
That's 355, right?
Okay.
It's 354 plus a little bit more, which the little bit more is you could consider like another day. So it's 355 days in a lunar year. What's the gematria of the word shana? Year.
Oh, 355.
355. Right? So that's a remiss to the fact that Shana, a year, is a remiss to the lunar year, which is 354 and a little bit, which is 355 days. That's what the Radal brings. Then he brings from the Zohar. I didn't really look this up inside, but it makes an interesting point that 354 is we say about the light of the moon, the light of the sun and the moon is going to be multiplied in the times of Mashiach. It's going to be Shiva Sayim. Shiva Sayim means 49 times. Shiva Sayim means 7 sevens,
Oh.
2 sevens,
Oh,
right? So 49 times. So it says 7 times 7 times 7 is 343 plus 12 because of the 12 Shvatim or the 12 months or whatever comes to 354.
355.
355. So it's an interesting cheshbon. I don't know why the Zohar says that. He just says that this is what the Zohar says. I have to look inside and see exactly what the context is. But it's an interesting point. 7 times 7 times 7 plus 12 is 355, which is also Gematria Shana. But it says the message: Kol Mazalot Misharsim L'Moilad L'Levana U'L'Soilos B'nei Adam. All the Mazalot, meaning we said last week that all the let's say there's each day, each hour of the week is ruled by a different mazel. So each of those hours, we said last week, you can have the moilad of the levana come out at a different hour of the week. Right? So each of those hours, each of those mazalos serve as the time that the moilad of the levana can fall out. Ulu toldes b'nei adam, and also those mazalos have influence on the toldos b'nei adam. On the toldos is the lives of people. Toldos literally means the generations of people, the descendants of people. But in this context, it just means their life, their biography, the vicissitudes of life can be influenced by the astrological features. And upon those mazalos, the world stands. This is better. We could give a whole share about this, about the concept of mazalos, of astrology. That the word mazal comes from the word noizal, which is dripping, because it's like a dripping. It's a what's it called? The trickle down influence of Hashem into the world is filtered through the mazalos in certain ways. Right? And the Gemara has a machlekes. Yesh mazal Yisrael, ein mazal Yisrael. Do mazalos only affect Jews? Or do mazalos only affect Goyim, or do they also affect Jews as well? And then the Rishonim speak about, even if you hold that mazalos do affect Jews, are there ways to get out of it? You can do tefillah, can get out of mazalos, praying, having a big schus, doing tzedakah, different things that you can get out of the trap of a person's, what we call it an astrological fate or destiny. You can get out of it in certain ways. Gemara says also shinei makom, shinei shame, shinei mazel. If a person, if someone Rahmanu Litzlan is sick, right, and it's not working out for them. So one of the eitzes that people do is you change their name. Right? Your name is Bracha. Now we give you a different name, Alta Bracha, something like that. Right? So that's a way of changing a person's mazel, because the mazel has to do with your name as well, or changing your place, because mazalos affect places in different ways. Each place has its own mazel, so there's different ways of affecting mazalos. So it's not like everything is 100% dependent on mazalos.
Yet here it says the world stands
Huh?
on those mazalos.
Right. Meaning, in a
Sounds
general,
like
sort of in a
everything is
general
affected.
sense, because there is still a concept of bechira. A person always has free will, and the Mazalot doesn't necessarily contradict your free will. See, the Rambam, in his letter to the sages of Marseille, he disagrees with the whole concept of astrology and says it's not a Jewish concept. And he says, there's Gemaras and other Chazals that seem to support the idea of astrology. So the Rambam says, no, we don't hold like that. He says, like, it was a machlekes amongst the early Chachamim, but we don't hold like those. We don't hold like those
Where's
Gemaras.
Messiah?
Chachmei Marseille.
Where's this?
The Rambam wrote it. It's one of the Igros Rambam.
No, where's this place, Messiah?
Marseille, I believe it's in France.
Yeah.
Southern France.
Yeah.
Merci.
Merci, that's how you pronounce it?
Pronounce it today. Huh?
Oh, I don't know.
Merci, I don't know.
Doesn't Marseille mean like excuse me or something?
Merci.
It means
Thank
thank you.
Thank you.
Merci is thank
Something
you.
like that.
Yeah.
But
Marseille.
I think the mainstream approach accepted by most of the Mefarshim is that there is such a thing as Mazalos. The way the Ramchal puts it down, the Ramchal says that the Mazal is the idea of like a person's, the situation in your life. All the outside factors that happen that like you don't have any control over. The Ramchal says that that's what we mean by Mazal. Mazal means the situation that you're put in. And then you can make your own decisions within that situation.
Like who your parents were, the place you were born into, that kind of stuff.
All these things, that's let's say Mazel.
Already happened.
Right, that's already happened. But you can make a decision. You can make certain decisions, and that's not a contradiction to Mazals. That's just that's each. The Ramchal has a deeper way of explaining it, that each neshama has its own tafkid in the world, and it's supposed to do certain things in order for the entire world to achieve its tikkun.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so like what we're supposed to do, as far as we know, is just like we have the Torah. The Torah tells us what to do, and we're just supposed to follow as well as we can to do what we're supposed to do. That's on a broader level, but on a more individual level, different people have, let's say, their own private tests, their own private nisyanis, that their mazel is sort of the situation that they're put in. And they're supposed to make the right decisions within that what's it called, within that arena, yeah, framework. But this is all like on beregal achas. It could be mamish a whole share about mazalos and these type of things. About this, about the mazalos, the pasuk says, "V'hayu la'isayis u'lamayadim." Actually, it's talking about the sun and the moon. But it's talking about the sun and the moon, all the celestial bodies. There shall be oisos, signs, umayadim, and people always translate mayadim as convocations, which means set times. Right? Oisos, the way the Marzu explains what the Medrash is saying over here, oisos means signs, meaning the different mazalos could be a sign of what's going to be in the future. Umayadim is referring to the fact that we decide when our Rosh Chodashim and when our Yomim Tovim are going to be based on the movements of the moon, the sun and the moon, or whatever. Says the Medrash, Oisais halalu lo yamushu misharsim lachama bayayim v'lalavana balayla. The Marzu says that this is a completely superfluous line. But to literally translate it is, Oisais halalu, these signs don't deviate from the sun during the day and the moon at night. Not sure exactly what that means, but that's more or less the point over here. Okay. Going weiter. Before we go weiter, just a little bit of chazorah about what we were doing for the last few weeks. Right? We said in the previous parak, in parak Vav, that there's a certain cycle of the sun that, let's say, Tkuvas Nisan, which is the beginning of the astronomical spring, Kufas Nisan, will fall out at the same time every how many years?
28.
Every 28 years, right? Because it was every 28 years, because it's every 4 years it'll fall out at the same time of the day. And then every 7 years it'll fall out on the same day of the week. So 4 times 7 is 28, and that's how you get every 28 years the sun will come. Will be at the same location by Tkufas Nisan at the same time of at the same time of the day, at the same day of the week, right? That's the sun. Now the moon, how often is the moilad of the moon, meaning the beginning of astronomical beginning of the month? When is it going to be at the same time on the same day of the week? How often does that happen? So he said earlier in this parak, last week we said this, that happens every 21 years, right? Every 3 years it's going to be the same time of the night, but a day earlier, and then every 7 years of those cycles, of those 3 year cycles, it'll be the same day of the week, right? So now like this, the Medrash wants to say that we want to make it that the sun, both the sun and the moon, are going to be at the same point that they were at the time of creation.
In that same year?
In the same year. So how often will that happen? Because the sun and the moon are moving at different speeds, right? So how often will it happen that they'll line up, that the sun and the moon are going to be at the same place, at the same time, at the same day of the week that it was at the creation of the world?
According to Rabbi Yehoshua.
According to Shmuel. Or according to Rabbi Shmuel, fine, whatever. But yeah. So the Medrash says it's every 84 years. How so? Says the Medrash. B'shloisha machzoros shel chama, with 3 machzoros, 3 cycles of the sun, 3 of those 28-year cycles, which 3 times 28 is 84. Va'arba machzoros shel levana, and 4 cycles of the moon, which 4 times 21 is also 84. Shmeinim v'arba shanim, 84 years. So 84 years is when the cycle of the sun and the cycle of the moon are going to line up, and it'll mamish mimic Bria Sa'ilam. Now it's interesting because we say Birkas Hachama every 28 years. As far as I know, we're not noyig to say anything every 21 years for the moon. And for sure there's no minhag to do any special thing for every 84 years where the sun and the moon come together. But it's an interesting thing. So like this. Shehi shah achas miyam shel Kadosh Baruch Hu, which is 1 hour of a day of Hashem. Boyim chama levana shavim, the sun and the moon come equal at the same time. Betchilas leil revi'i uvishar shabsai bishar shenivru, at the beginning of leil revi'i, meaning Tuesday night, which is the night of Wednesday, at shah shabsai, meaning the first hour of that night. B'shah shenivru, at the hour that they were born, that they were created. The sun and the moon were created the first hour of Wednesday, the night of Wednesday. Over here is Shabsai. Where is it? Here, Shabsai. Right. So when will it be that the Kufas Nisan and the Moilad will be on Shabsai? Every 84 years. That's what the Medrash says.
That's going to be on a Tuesday. It's going to be actually super early Wednesday morning, even though we call it Tuesday night.
Right. Now, there's a few problems with this, but let's say like this. First of all, the Medrash said that it's 1 hour of a day of Hashem. Right? So let's make that calculation. What does it mean 1 hour of the day of Hashem? So we said that the day of Hashem is 1,000 years. 1,000 years for us is 1 day of Hashem. Ki elav shanim be'enacha ki yom esmael. Right? So 1,000 years for us is 1 day of Hashem. So 1,000 divided by 12 is 83 and a third. So really 83 and a third years of us is 1 hour for Hashem. So again,
so we have to divide by 24?
What? Oh, 1 second. So for some reason the assumption is that you divide it by 12 because I don't know why, but we also spoke about this in Parak Memches when we spoke about how long would Klal Yisrael in the Mitzrayim as slaves. But I think the assumption is because the creation of the world, Hashem was only doing creation during the day and not during the night, something like that. So you only divide it into 12. But if you divide it into 1,000 into 12, so you get 83 and a third, Which I guess if you sort of round it in some way, it's like you could say the 84th hour. You could say it like
the
that.
Radal did.
That's what he did, yeah.
That's what the Radal did
With Miriam.
the Chodesh.
Something like that.
With the Chodesh.
Oh, with the Chodesh, right.
He said, because it's only 8 hours, and yet he said 300.
Yeah, right, because it's plus a little bit more. It's like the 84th hour. The 84th, what's it called? The 84th year is right, whatever, yeah. Is an hour of Hashem's time. What was it? GST, right? God Standard Time, not Greenwich Standard Time. Greenwich Mean Time, or whatever. The Ma'aseh the Marzu doesn't like this explanation of what we're saying over here, because what we're trying to do is create a common denominator between the sun's cycle and the moon's cycle. But he says it can't be true because we're talking about the solar year and the lunar year. It's different years. You're right, if you take just the number 21 and 28, so you can get 84 as the common denominator between them, but you're talking about different types of years. The solar year is 365 days, and the lunar year is 354 days and a half a day. So it doesn't really shtim. The Marzul has a different pshat in exactly what the Medrash is talking about over here, but I didn't understand it, so I don't want to go into it. Okay, now the next thing that the Medrash says, I also don't exactly understand it, but I understand it in some sort of conceptual way. I don't exactly understand the words that it says, but I think this is what it's saying. Let's read it like this. At the time that the flame of the moon reaches the sun, Bayom b'mailes shishim, during the day at 60 degrees, Oiver b'seichai u'machabe es oirei. The moon passes in front of it and extinguishes its light.
The light extinguishes the light of itself, the
Of
moon?
the sun.
Of the sun.
Of the sun. What I understand we're talking about over here is what we call a solar eclipse, whereby the moon comes in between the earth and the sun, and the moon blocks the sun, right? And that's what the Medrash is talking about over here. Machabe es oyer. What does it mean that the moon extinguishes the light of the sun? It means that it blocks it. The moon will come in front of the sun from our perspective and block it, and that's what a solar eclipse is. Now this gets a little bit difficult. When the flame of the sun comes to the moon at night at 40 degrees and passes over it, it extinguishes its light. Which I don't know what this means, but I would assume that we're talking about, just to maintain the consistency sort of what we're talking about, or the parallelism, I would assume that we're talking about a lunar eclipse now. Now, the way a lunar eclipse works is that the earth comes between the sun and the moon, so that the sun is not shining at any part of the moon. It's only shining at the earth, and the moon is on the other side. You can't see the moon b'chlal. Right? That's what a lunar eclipse is. So that's what the Medrash, I would assume, is saying. I don't know how to fit it exactly into the words, but the Medrash is talking about a solar eclipse earlier, and now we're talking about a lunar eclipse where the earth is blocked where the moon is blocked by the earth, and the sun is not shining at the moon b'chal. These two things. So the point of the Medrash over here, the way the Marazul understands it, is that it's coming to tell us that there's a mathematical or astronomical way of calculating or determining or predicting when exactly a solar and lunar eclipse will occur. It's a cold way, a mathematical way you can calculate it. You can figure it out based on a scientific metzias, based on a scientific reality. This is what happens, and that's what it means, and that's what it is. The next line in the Medrash is going to take it a step further. Rabbi Nehorai Rabbi Nehorai says, Gzeras Melach He. It is a decree of the king. The words Bimila Mufursames does not appear in the Higger edition from the Ksav Yad, and the Radal says it doesn't appear in the Yalkut Shveni, it doesn't appear in the Rekach, and the Gra also takes it out. So those words are a bit problematic. But Gzeres Melech Hi, it is a decree of the king. If you want to have those words, you can read it as B'mila. The Marzu says Mila means with his word, meaning like the king decreed it with his word. Before Semis it's out in the open that you can like see it, and it's publicized because everyone knows about it just by looking at the sky. But it's a decree of the king, meaning it's a Gzera. Hashem made a decree that at the time that the Jews are sinning and they don't do Ibur Hashanah like they're supposed to, they don't add the extra month in order to make the solar calendar, the solar year work with the lunar year. They don't do that. At the time that the flame of the sun reaches the moon at night at 40 degrees, HaKadosh Baruch Hu machhe es halavana, Hashem dims the light of the moon, and Hashem hides one of the people of the Sanhedrin, meaning he kills someone from the Sanhedrin, one of the Gedolim of Klal Yisrael. He hides him, meaning he puts him in Olam Haba, takes him away from this world. So what the Medrash is saying over here is that when the Jews don't act properly, and Rabbi Meir says they're not acting properly, they're imitating the ways of the Goyim, because the Christians, they only care about the solar calendar, they don't care about the lunar calendar, or let's say the opposite way, that the Muslims only care about the lunar calendar, they don't care about the solar calendar. So when the Jews imitate the ways of the Goyim and they focus on one and not both, so they're doing the wrong thing. So Hashem gives them, and there's going to be, scientifically, it's supposed to be a lunar eclipse, so that's a bad sign for Klal Yisrael, and Hashem makes the Lovana, which represents Klal Yisrael, makes it weak and kills one of the people from the Sanhedrin. That's the punishment for Klal Yisrael.
So we take into account both calendars then?
What? One sec, what?
I don't remember, a couple of years ago there was a lunar eclipse here.
Yeah.
I don't remember any of the Gedolim,
So like this. So the Marzuz says like this. Before this line, we were saying how there's an astronomical scientific reality called a lunar eclipse and a solar eclipse. The one thing is that there's such a reality. Now we're taking it a step further and saying that when that reality also aligns with a spiritual reality, meaning Klal Yisrael, let's say in this line, is doing the wrong thing. So when there's Klal Yisrael is doing the wrong thing and there's a lunar eclipse, so together, I guess it's ma'or certain dinim and shemayim, and it's a bad sign for Klal Yisrael. And then someone from the Sanhedrin will die, which is the Marzuz says mida keneged mida, because the Sanhedrin is the one that's charged with making sure that we add an extra month when necessary. So therefore, if they're not doing the proper thing, then you lose the person from the Sanhedrin.
That happens like. Now we always do the proper thing because the calendar's set.
Okay, so it could be that this whole discussion is moot.
And we have no Sanhedrin.
Yeah, it could be you're right. And we don't have a Sanhedrin, and we already have a set calendar. It could be this whole discussion is moot. But the point is, in a way, that the astronomical phenomenon of solar and lunar eclipses, besides being just physical existences, also have certain spiritual connotations. That if you're doing the right thing, then it means something good. We're going to see in a moment. And if we're doing the bad thing, then it's sort of foreboding something bad to come.
So Judaism takes into account both calendars?
Yeah, Vada.
There's two chapters here in this.
Because Pesach's always in spring.
There's two chapters, right? Parak Vav is about the sun, Parak Zayin is about the moon, and Parak Ches, which we did 2 years ago, is about both of them together.
Do we put more
The
of a
Soida
focus
Ibor.
on the moon than the sun though?
In general, we do put. I think I would say we put more of a focus on it.
So we have an atiyah to the moon.
We haven't. Let's say you could say it like
so
that.
The moon is like the favorite your child, and the sun is like
No,
the outcast.
It's definitely true because look,
Tomorrow.
the punishment.
I feel bad for the sun.
No, because the punishment for Klal Yisrael is that the moon gets weakened and Hashem takes away one of the people from the Sanhedrin.
So
Why is the moon getting weakened? The punishment for Klal Yisrael, because the moon represents Klal Yisrael. In different, we've spoken about this in different ways, in different contexts. Because like the sun is something it's always the same, right? a Jew is not always the same. A Jew is always changing. You're always doing. You're on your way up or you're on your way down. You're waxing or waning.
They say that
like
man
the
is
moon.
like a sun and a lady is like a moon. That's what
Okay,
she says.
there's different bechinas when
So
you
all Klal
depends
Yisrael
what
is
you're
like a
comparing it. Yeah, no, Vada. We're all Klal Yisrael is definitely like a woman because Klal Yisrael is mekabel from a Kadosh Baruch Hu.
Was the going they give
Whereas the guy, they look at themselves. How do they look at themselves? They look at themselves as if they're the ones that are giving off influence. They don't realize that everything comes from
So
Hashem.
a Yid who leaves Torah mitzvahs.
They think that they're like the sun.
A Yid who abandons Torah mitzvahs becomes like the sun then?
In I guess in that aspect, sort of.
So someone who becomes fire, he becomes into the sun. Suddenly a great light comes out of him. No?
Something like that.
Wow.
I don't think you can make that deal.
I haven't heard any about Shuvah said that when he became from, he felt like
He saw the light.
like he didn't suddenly. He said that.
I don't think that's how it works. I think
Some
you're a
local
Jew, you're always a Jew.
Yeah, Yisrael afal pishachato Yisrael.
So the most secular
Right.
Jew is the moon. Nothing you can do about it.
Well,
He says I'm the sun, but he's the moon. Identity crisis. Yeah.
yeah.
It's like the sun, the moon proclaiming that he's the sun. Yeah.
Something like that.
Until you have to get Hitler to remind him.
When the Jews do what Hashem, the will of Hashem, Hashem does with His great mercy, and He weakens the sun, and He sends forth His wrath upon the nations of the world. The Radal adds from other sources. The Ger says that when Klal Yisrael does Ritzon Shabbakim and they do Ibur Shana properly, so then Hashem sends forth His wrath on the Goyim. Shenemat says the pasuk Kayim Hashem al derech hagoyim al tilmodu, don't learn from the ways of the Goyim. U'mi'oisas Hashem al techasu, and from the signs of the heavens, don't be scared. Ki yechatu hagoyim mehema, because the Goyim are scared of the signs of the heavens. Hagoyim yechatu v'lo Yisrael. The Goyim are scared of the signs of the heavens, but not the Jews. Because that's talking about a time when the Jews are doing the proper thing. So then a solar eclipse, a lunar eclipse doesn't have a bad implication for the Jews. And on the contrary, a solar eclipse is going to have a bad implication for the Goyim. The Radal says that it sounds like over here that when the Jews are doing what Hashem wants, so not only is there not going to be a lunar eclipse, but when it's supposed to be a lunar eclipse, Hashem switches it and makes it that there'll be a solar eclipse instead.
Is that a good thing?
That's what the Radal says, and will punish the Goyim.
So that's a good thing.
It's a good thing, but you have to know the Radal himself says like this. He says, "Im yisparish al chama ulvana gashmiyim." If we're talking about the physical sun and the moon, b'chal. It could be we're just talking about it in a spiritual sense. Because it's not true. It doesn't.
Because we just said that they are on a clock.
Right.
It just said that they're it's not
right.
like we do chait and there's a thing.
Right.
It's on a clock. There's going to be a thing, whether we do chait or not. So
right.
The Radal had to say that. Somebody had to say that.
And the Rabbi Meir just points out that the advantage of Hashem sending His wrath upon the Goyim, you could say it in one of two ways. One is like, okay, your enemy is getting punished instead of you, so it's a good thing for me. Or you could say in a different way that when Hashem is punishing the Goyim, so then the Goyim are too busy bearing the brunt of their punishment that they can't bother us, because they have their own problems that they're dealing with, so they're not gonna. Okay, there's different times in history when both of those have played out. The Marzusa is also an interesting. It makes a little bit of an interesting pun over here. Who said this whole shtick over here is Rabbi Nehorai. So Nehorai, he says Rabbi Nehorai Haman here einei chachamim hu. He is the one who enlightened the eyes of the chachamim. Nehorai in Aramaic, Nehoira means light in Aramaic. So Rabbi Nehorai enlightened us about how these things work. Nehorai is light. The Gemara says that Rabbi Nehorai is another name for Rabbi Meir. Meir also means light. Yeah. Nehorai and Rabbi Meir is the same person. So it's like he's making light for us in the sugya. And Arinu La'ayin, and he enlightened our eyes about this. Okay, we're going to read some more things that I don't really know what we're talking about, but this is what it says. Just like the light of the sun doesn't rule over the light of the moon, and the light of the moon doesn't rule over the light of the sun. I don't know what that means. So too, you don't count the days of the sun during the night or the days of the moon during the day. Not sure exactly what that means. And each one won't encroach on the boundaries of his fellow. Meaning the sun always. I guess what it means is that the sun is always during the day, the moon is always associated with the night, and that's how it is. And they don't mess around. The moon is visible during the day. So what do you do with that? I don't know exactly. So I don't know exactly what the Medrash is saying over here. What this idea of loy minyan achama balayla loy minyan levana bayim. We also speak about it in Paragas, which when we did it over there, also I didn't exactly understand what it was talking about. Midar halavana ben anan larafel. The living place of the moon is between an anan and an arafel. What's an anan and an arafel? Anan and arafel are both sort of types of clouds, dark clouds, I guess. Anan is traditionally translated as a cloud, and arafel is like mist. So like one's like a more solid cloud, Anan is a more solid cloud, and arafel is more like a more misty cloud. Asuyin, so the moon dwells between an Anan and an arafel, a cloud and a mist. Asuyin kimin shtei ki'aris kfuya zoyal gavzum. Those two, the two types of clouds are made like two plates that were upside down, this on top of the other. And the moon comes from in between these two clouds. I don't know what this means. I'm just reading it. Agav, Rashi in the Sefer HaPardes HaGadol, Rashi says that in davening we say in Shabbos, we say which you spoke about in Perek Vav. Hashem takes the sun from its place, and the moon from the dwelling place where it's settled. So what Rashi says, Rashi in the Sefer HaGadol, which is a pirush on the Siddur, more or less, Rashi says, what does it mean that the moon from its place where it dwells? That's talking about this, that the moon comes from between like these two clouds, whatever exactly that means. The moon comes from between these two clouds. When it's the moilad of the Levana, when it's the beginning of the month, these two clouds turn their faces, meaning the opening from between the two clouds, right? Because they're like upside down plates, so they sort of like this, right? It comes out to the west side, and the moon is going to rise from the west side. The moon is going to rise from the west side like in the shape of a shofar. Or the Radal brings from the Tikkuni Zohar that the moon is going to come out first in the shape of a chaf. Meaning like a little sliver of a crescent. Right? Balayla harishayin mira achas. On the first night of the month in one quality. One quantity, let's say. On the second night of the month, a different way. A little bit more. Until this is the way it goes until half of the month. Until half of the month, then in the middle of the month, the entire face of the moon you can see. That's the waxing of the moon. Now the opposite. From the middle of the month, these two clouds turn about l'ruach mizrachis, to the east side, and now the moon is going to be facing towards the east. Pa'as halavana shiyatz mitchila maschil v'nichtas u'beskasa ben shnehem. Right, the moon is going to be covered by them, and it's going to be losing part of the inside and becoming smaller and smaller. First night in one way, the second night in a different way. Till more and more of the moon is covered. The end of the month, the moon is completely covered. Right? That's the waning of the moon. How do we know that the moon is placed in between these two clouds that either cover one side of the moon or the other side of the moon at different parts of the month? It says in the pasuk, Besumi anan levushai va'arafel chasulasai. this is a pasuk that in Eov it's talking about Hashem creating the ocean. And when Hashem's creating the ocean, Hashem says, "Besumi anan levushai," I have set an anan, a cloud, as his clothing. There's a cloud above the ocean. Va'arafel chasulasai, and a mist that's covering it. Mufarsha said chasulasai is like tachrichim. It's a more crude form of clothing. Levusha is like real, like made clothing, fitted clothing, or whatever. And chasulasa is just something that you like wrap in it.
Means his cat.
No, that's in modern and I don't know, in rabbinic Hebrew, chatula is a cat, but chasulasa means like tachrichin. That's what the Mefarshim say over there in Eov. So like an anan is like a developed cloud, and an arafel is like a misty sort of a cloud, but it's less solidified. So anan is levush, because it's more like, it has sleeves and whatever. And arafel is like tachrichin, it's just like something that you wrap him in.
Shrouds.
Like shrouds. Now, it's shrouded in mist. That was
Mystery.
good. In mystery. Now, the problem is that, as I mentioned, this pasuk is talking about Hashem creating the ocean. So now we're bringing this pasuk to tell you that the moon is in between two clouds. But we're not talking about the moon. The pasuk is talking about the ocean. So what are we saying over here? So the Radal says that no, the ocean, and when you talk about the ocean and you talk about the moon, it's really talking about the same thing. Because on the next pasuk, or two pasukim later, the pasuk talks about how Hashem set the boundaries of how far the waves of the ocean are supposed to go. Now, we all know that scientifically they say that
tsunamis?
the waves of the ocean, the tide of the sea, is based on the state of the moon, right? High tide, low tide, it depends on, is the moon a full moon, is it waxing, is it waning, etc. Right? So the Radal says that we're bringing a pasuk that's talking about the ocean, but the ocean is influenced by the moon itself. So that's why that's why the Medrash, which is talking about the moon, brings a pasuk that's talking about the ocean. Fine.
Does that include tsunamis though?
I don't know. So the end of the month,
It just means tides,
tides.
not the waves.
The waves that don't come from the tides?
I don't think so. I think waves come
No,
from
you're
the
from
wind.
California. You're a surfer guy,
You're
no?
also from California, and I'm not a surfer guy.
So the Medrash says that at the end of the month, or the beginning of the month, the moon is completely covered, or enclosed, or hidden by these Anan and Arafel. So says the Medrash, how do we know that the moon is completely covered? Blow on Rosh Chodesh the shofar at the holiday of Keseh, where it's hidden. So Chodesh in Tanakh means month, but it also means the beginning of the month, Rosh Chodesh, right? Like when the Isha Shunamis when her son died, and she was running off to Elisha to try to get something done, to try to get him revived. So her husband says to her, "Why are you going to Elisha, to the Navi? Loy Chodesh v'lei Shabbos." What does it mean, Loy Chodesh v'lei Shabbos? It means it's not Rosh Chodesh and it's not Shabbos. The word Chodesh means Rosh Chodesh, right? So Tiku b'Chodesh Shofar b'Kesel Yom Chagenu is talking about the holiday that falls out on a Rosh Chodesh. What holiday falls out on a Rosh Chodesh? It's also known as Rosh Hashanah. Right? That's what Tiku b'Chodesh Shofar. The holiday that falls out on the time that the moon is hidden, b'Kesel Yom Chagenu, the holiday where it's hidden, is Tiku b'Chodesh Shofar, blow the shofar, which is on Rosh Hashanah, which is on the holiday that the moon is hidden because it's at the beginning of the month and there's no moon on Rosh Hashanah.
I thought Dafka.
On the day that the moon is completely hidden, which is the beginning of the month, so the holiday that's the beginning of the month, which is Rosh Hashanah, that's the only holiday that's the beginning of the month, so that's when you should blow shofar.
I thought Dafka, the Rosh Chodesh is when you can see the moon.
Theoretically.
The Molad is So what is the Molad? The Molad is when you can see the moon, and the Molad is that point where
the Molad is when you can theoretically see the moon. The Molad is when you can theoretically.
The 6 or 8 hours after.
Mamish theoretically you can see the moon, but you really can't, because because it's way too small. Then there's certain shiurim.
Theoretically,
The sun, the moon, and
perfect line.
the sun, the moon, and the earth are lined up in a way that
really
part of the moon
understood.
could be visible,
Okay.
but it's not really visible because it's too small.
That's the molad.
That's the
Oh,
molad.
the visible part is when we machadish the chodesh, when people see
Right,
the moon
right.
and Adim come.
Right.
That is not the molad. That's 8 hours, l'chora, 6 or 8 hours after
Right.
the molad.
Yeah.
And that's when you can
That's
have
in
the eight-
Mekadosh.
Okay, that's molad. But Rosh Hashanah.
You're right.
is when you do see
You're
the
right.
moon.
Technically, Rosh Chodesh and Rosh Hashanah is when you could see the moon.
Because that's when
But
you
it's
machadish the
yeah,
moon.
in Echanami.
It's just being theoretical.
Theoretically, right. They say an interesting idea, right? We say that Chodesh means Rosh Chodesh, right? Like Chodesh, like Shabbos. We brought a pasuk. So there's a famous story. Not a famous story, but whatever. They say that the Brisker Rav had a son. His name was Chaim. He went crazy because of the Holocaust or whatever. But there's a few vortlach that they say from Chaim, the son of the Brisker Rav. He asked the question let's say when you're benching, right? It's Shabbos Rosh Chodesh. So what do you say first? Yalav Yavo or Ritzeh? Which one do you say first?
Ritzeh.
You say Ritzeh. Why?
It's printed that way.
Because Tadeh V'Sheina Tadeh Tadeh. That which is more common, right? It comes first, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he asked the question. He says, "So I don't understand." When Isha Shunabis' husband asked her why is she going to Elisha, so he said Lo Chodesh V'Lo Shabbos. Why did he say Lo Chodesh Lo Shabbos? He should say Lo Shabbos Lo Chodesh, right? Because Shabbos comes before Rosh Chodesh. Right? It's Tadeh V'Sheina Tadeh Tadeh.
It's an interesting question.
I think there's an answer, but
Right, so his answer is, so they asked this question to Reb Chaim, the son of the Brisker Rav, and he said answer like this. He said, no, because what is she saying? She says, Loi Chodesh v'loi Shabbos. It's not Rosh Chodesh and it's not Shabbos. It's more commonly not Rosh Chodesh than it is not Shabbos. So it is Tadr. She said not Rosh Chodesh is more common than not Shabbos. So that's what she said, Loi Chodesh v'loi Shabbos.
Yom Chol.
Yeah. What were you going to say?
I once spoke to someone about it, and we both came to the same conclusion that it doesn't mean that she won every single Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh. The meaning is that once in a while she went to the Navi, or they went to the Navi for whatever. So if they went at an appropriate time to go, would let's say Rosh Chodesh or for Shabbos, but it doesn't mean that they went every Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh.
Okay, fine. But still, okay, fine. Those are two like good excuses when to go. But then the question would be like, why Dafka didn't say Chodesh before Shabbos? No, the word is a shtickle of a joke.
And
But
Chodesh could be like Rosh Chodesh. It could be like once a month or whatever.
Yeah.
Shabbos could be like certain times during the week.
Right.
Chodesh and Shabbos doesn't necessarily mean Rosh Chodesh.
yeah. All right, fine. Shkoyach.
Koyach.